Welcome back to the Hard Skills Show. And I do not think I will ever get sick of hearing my own intro music. It just gets me going. So, the Hard Skills Show is where we take a deep dive into the most challenging soft skills required to navigate leadership uncertainty, complexities, and change. That's why it's called the Hard Skills. And it's for today and into the future. I'm your host, Dr. Mira Brancu, psychologist, leadership consultant, and founder of TowerScope. Now, what stories and messages do we pay attention to that guides how we think about workplace culture and safety? And what stories and behaviors must we let go of to create healthier workplaces? So today, we're really going to explore how we set up, how we see crisis, how we mitigate crises, how we respond to crises, how we whether we are even able to spot it, and how we recover from it. And I honestly cannot think of a better focus for season 7 focus on navigating unhealthy environments and also uncertainties. Right now, we are navigating in a time of high uncertainty, many crises. I feel like they're almost like right on top of each other, which I think is different than many of us are accustomed to even training for a crisis. So I'm super excited today to talk with you and share some of these ideas with a special guest who is the expert in addressing, spotting, mitigating crises, responding to crises, even around your reputation around crises, all of these things, right? So whether you're a leader, managing a team, a coach, simply trying to support your colleagues, this conversation is for you. And before we get started, this is also a reminder that our workshop, Redefining and Developing Your Leadership Identity in 2025, is coming up. This is the final week to get the preferred pricing for it. And the workshop includes a leadership assessment, several tools to help you explore how to apply your leadership style and identity to current leadership decisions, transition, people management. You can find that information all on the events page of my website, www.gotowerscope.com/events, or just go to gotowerscope.com, go under resources, find events, and you'll find it there. Okay, let me introduce you to our guest. Stephanie Craig is a crisis management expert who has guided some of the world's most prominent people and organizations, including Fortune 50 tech companies, members of the House and Senate in the United States and Canada, and former First Lady Rosalynn Carter through their most trying moments, combining her deep expertise in politics, in media, and business. She mitigates crises, repairs reputations, and inoculates against future reputation damage. So she is like the wraparound service for crisis management. She is also a battleground specialist and likely the only person to have worked in both houses on Capitol Hill and Parliament Hill. Super interesting. Can't wait to talk with her. Welcome and great to have you on the show, Stephanie.
Mira, I am so thrilled to be with you. I should take you with me everywhere because that was a wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So you have worked in media, you've worked in lots of different sort of crisis management situations with politics, other industries. First of all, like, how did you get into this field in the first place?
It's being calm in the middle of chaos is something I've always done. My mom used to say that I've been through every kind of natural disaster except a tsunami. Uh,
Wow.
and I do not choose to cross that one off the list. But I was born in the Canadian Arctic to
Mm.
my dad was a Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer, and
Oh,
a lot of his job was hostage negotiation, to be quite frank. And
wow.
it comes naturally to me. Um, Problem solving is something that I do well, which a lot of women in particular do very well, is problem solving. And it just kind of happened that I graduated from the University of North Dakota in 1997, and if anyone Googles that, I woke up to one of my sorority sisters shaking my foot saying, "Hey, Steph, Grand Forks is flooded, university's canceled, and congratulations, you just graduated."
Oh my gosh.
And so it, just kind of flew from there. My parents were in Canada, which was actually oddly directly north of the flooding river. And I ended up kind of driving my mom up the wall.
Hmm.
And she said, "There's a federal election going on. Go figure out which party you belong to and go work." And I've just learned so much from there, fell in love with politics. And actually, there's a real moment that stands out for me in that experience is I was working with a team that was supporting a very, very prominent member of cabinet. And if you're familiar with how Canada's politics works, it's, cabinet members also go back for reelection. And we were doing an event, and it was supposed to be a town hall with seniors. And it was being run by this candidate's head of communications, and it started raining, which most seniors tend not to want to go out when it's raining. And we got word that this 65-person event, about 8 people were coming,
Oh,
but an entire caravan of media were going to be there. And so this woman looks at me and she goes, her name's Leslie. She goes, "Stephanie, what kind of event are we having?" And I'm 21 years old. I'm wearing pants that I've just bought because all my stuff had been flooded. I was like, a town hall. She goes, "No, we're having a round table." And I looked at her. She goes, "Go find a table, and then we're going to put all these chairs away, and we're gonna have 10 chairs around a table, and we're gonna have a conversation."
brilliant.
That was really my first example of being in the moment and saying, "Okay, we need to fix this, and we need to fix this now."
Yeah. Yeah. Pivoting, brilliant assessment of the situation and quick pivoting, right?
Yeah, and that,
I, yeah.
oh yeah.
And also, I just realized, I don't know if we're the same age, but we graduated same year.
Must have been a vintage year.
It was the most important year.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, okay. So this is really interesting. So your first experience with crisis management was around assessing that you had to pivot with an event and still make it valuable and meaningful for the people who were attending,
Well,
right?
and also, you don't want the news story in the middle of a campaign that nobody showed up to your event.
Right.
And
Right. Yeah.
so I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna snow you or your viewers. That's probably more about what it was than, but it just, I think it's being able to look at a situation and figure out how to make it the most advantageous for everyone involved. So when you look at that particular incident, these seniors, the 8 or so that ventured out in this rainstorm, got to sit down and have a conversation with one of the most powerful men in the world at that time. And so it was beneficial for them. It was beneficial for the campaign because they came to a great event. The media came to a great event, and it was very beneficial for the member of parliament. And I'm apologizing. I have some sniffles, so I'm going to have to do the old lady thing.
And it's all good. I mean, I was telling Stephanie that such a complete professional that she's feeling under the weather, but she didn't want to leave us in the lurch, and here she is, with the sniffles and everything, still here. There's another crisis management story in there, I'm sure.
Well, just a funny little aside, I actually broke my leg about 10 years ago, and I was running external affairs for a trade association, and we were doing an announcement that went with the sun across the country. And I ended up in the back of the ambulance on my phone trying to direct what was happening.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
so I think I might be a little unhinged, I think is the way to put it.
This is not, you're like, this is nothing.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
you say that recognizing that crisis can happen at any time and preparing for it is a sign of sophisticated leadership.
Mhm.
Why?
Most people, if you think about, uh, let's look at it from a perspective of creating wills and funeral planning. Most people do not like to think about bad things. And that transfers directly to organizational leadership. They don't want to think about bad things. And it's sometimes it's they don't want to think about it. Sometimes it's just pure arrogance that it won't happen to them. But being aware that a crisis, and let me be clear about something, crisis is unique to you. Something that is a crisis to a shoe manufacturing company isn't going to be a crisis to a social media company. So crises are very unique. And so it takes a sophisticated leader to, first of all, address the problem, say, okay, we will have a problem,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then invest in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the sophistication comes in, that people don't sit back and say, okay, well, we'll just take care of it itself when it happens.
Yeah.
And what I mean by investing, I mean identifying it for your leadership team, putting aside some of your budget for crisis preparation and skill refinement activities, making sure that you have clear and concise structures that are articulated throughout your organization about what's supposed to happen. And this is something that we really advise on, which is create a core crisis team. And it is usually 6 to 8 people. And I like them to have one, if not both of these characteristics, that they can make a decision or that they're a subject matter expert. And they are the folks that are tasked with making decisions when a crisis happens. And there's a distinction that people make that I've never really understood, which is people say, okay, well, we had a fire at our shoe manufacturing plant, but it's not a reputational crisis. It is a reputational crisis. Some child's not getting their new tennis shoes for Christmas. That brings down the value of your product in their eyes. Your supply chain does no longer has faith in you. That's a reputational crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you talk about sophisticated leadership, it's understanding that all of those factors matter to the value of your business. And in the industry now, I think folks are settling on that your reputation is 35% of your value.
Mm.
Some people it goes up, some people it goes down, but it's really settling on 35%. So if you think about an organization that makes something, are you going to, your company is probably, your factory is probably worth 50% of your business. So your reputation is worth almost as much as the physical structure. Wouldn't you do the same things to protect it? And that's why we call it sophisticated leadership, because understanding all how this all plays together and how it all weaves together and then acting on it and showing leadership to the rest of your organization that I think this is important, so I am putting people and resources and time behind it. That shows a sophisticated leader that wants to protect what they've built, what their people build, and wants to see it progress into the future. That's why it's sophisticated.
Amazing. Now I have a million thoughts and ideas and questions for you, but we are reaching an ad break. So, what I'd like to start with when we come back from the ad break is around just thinking about the impact of somebody's culture, personality, and background experiences in terms of how they end up anticipating and prepping for these kinds of things. So you're listening to the Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Branco, and our guest today, Stephanie Craig. We air on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. At that time, you can find us live streaming on LinkedIn, YouTube, and several other locations at talkradio.nyc, and we'll be right back in just a moment.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our crisis expert in residence, Stephanie Craig. So, Stephanie, you got me really thinking about these elements of sophisticated leadership focusing on reputation management around crisis. And there's 3 areas that got me thinking. Number 1 is, in some ways, the ability to look for, spot, anticipate crises that are going to happen in front of us come from our experiences being able to manage those things, and now we have more awareness to look for them in the future. It also might come from personality. People who are overly optimistic, more confident, less bothered by crises, they might kind of brush off things, like you said, that like might be more of a concern to other people and might not spot that it will be of concern in the eyes of other people, even if it's not a concern in their eyes, right? And then there's like cultural background. You made me think about how, like in my culture as a Jewish person, we talk about death all the time. It's like not a big deal. We plan for it, et cetera, et cetera. And as someone who, immigrated, I also got comfortable with thinking about all the what ifs and making like plan B, plan C, plan D to make sure that we're financially stable and we're okay and all of that stuff. Whereas people who have been comfortable for a long time don't think about those things. Or maybe just the US culture of being comfortable with chaos or overlooking things that we shouldn't overlook. All of those things have an impact on how we prepare for, look for, anticipate crises. And so if I'm more on the end of comfortable with crises and not bothered by, being thrown at, lots of things at me and overly optimistic and all of these things, how might I prepare better to better meet the needs of my constituents or the people who would actually be concerned and care and want to see something else of me?
Well, it's very much, there are people like me, and it sounds like you, who could be standing in the middle of a stampede and be perfectly fine. But I would also recognize it's a crisis. And this is something that we counsel people on, is there has to be a common language within your organization. And that is where it starts, is that you work with your top down, leadership down, and everybody understands that when I say crisis for my widget factory, we all know what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
you may be working on the line in the widget factory and something breaks down or a widget comes out looking funny. You know that because that widget is looking funny, I have to let somebody know, because we've talked about what a funny widget looks like.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
And that kind of common understanding is really important. As like you, I am also an immigrant. There are things that I still say very strangely that my stepkids don't understand. I still call a sofa a it just completely my mind. Chesterfield. I call a sofa a Chesterfield.
Oh.
They have no idea what that means. And those kind of common, just they seem very simple. To look at me, everyone's like, oh, she went to the University of North Dakota and she's a sorority girl and she's all these things. But I remember being a little kid and having to stay after school because there were wolves in town. That's not something that most little kids in America have had to deal with. And so having that common understanding of what a crisis, because to your point, if I'm telling, like, I know wolves in town are a problem. I tell somebody who's never lived in those areas and they're visiting and then, oh, there's wolves in town. They're like, oh, cute wolves. That's a misunderstanding of language. And it doesn't have to be the actual wolf. It could be the fictitious wolf in your company, but you all need to understand what the wolf is.
Yeah. Yeah.
What the crisis is. And that comes from practice. And of course, we would love people to do these big, elaborate crisis simulations with us and do all of this. Honestly, it can be really simple to start these types of trainings and these types of language pairing with each other. Every Friday at your staff meeting, hold up your phone, or if you still use newspapers, of your local newspaper or your industry, your trade association newspaper, and say, if this happened to us, what would we do?
Mm-hmm.
Just so you have this starting point of a conversation. And it doesn't have to be scary, and it doesn't have to be, okay, sirens are rolling and you're expected to know exactly what you need to do. You have to start in a way that says, okay, we need to build the systems. We need to
Yeah.
build the system that says, okay, you know what your job is. You know who you need to call next. We've actually framed that into something called clarity plus trust equals strategic speed. And if anyone knows anything or about crisis management or crisis communications, or really even watch that nice early 2000s show Scandal,
Mm.
that speed is the differentiator for crisis response. I would differ on that. It's not speed for speed's sake, it's strategic speed. If you are just responding willy-nilly and you don't have a clue what you're doing, you're not getting anywhere. So, say clarity. So, clarity in who you are, like what, who matters to you, what matters to you, and then who matters to you again, and who matters to them. So, clarity in your top constituents, your top stakeholders, what matters to that top stakeholders, that's a toughie. And then, what matters to you, what are your values as an organization? Because we found that if you state a value and you don't live that value, that's a friction where a crisis will start. If you say you are for clean water and your company is disposing of your waste in the local streams, that's going to be a problem. So know your values, know your stakeholders, and know what your stakeholders value. That, and then plus trust. Trust in the people, the policies, and the procedures that you're going to rely on in a crisis. That means everybody knows their job. They're not deciding on the spot who the spokesperson's going to be. They know. They know that, okay, this is a ransomware attack. We have ransomware insurance, and this is what that ransomware insurance says. Because you've trusted in the policies and procedures and the people to know who knows what, who does what when. And the clarity in who you are, what you are, and who matters to you, plus the trust in the people, policies, and procedures equals that strategic speed, which will make the differentiation. And and once you get to that point, once everybody knows what they're doing, everyone knows your values, you're all speaking the same language, so you all can spot a crisis when it shows up.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So let me just highlight a couple of things that I pulled out, and then also follow up on a couple of follow-up questions here. So number one, I hear define what crisis is, right? Shared language around crisis is critical. We talk about having a shared language all the time when it comes to teams, right? And the miscommunication that happens when you don't understand, for example, what each of you think about as what respect means to me, right? This is the same idea, but around crises. What is a crisis to us? I love that. And then also makes perfect sense, simulation, right? Have simulation experiences. And some of where you were starting to go with clarity plus trust equals strategic speed. I've worked in hospitals, and they have a clear understanding of having this crisis response team, right? And within the Department of Veterans Affairs, they often call it like a command control, and they know who to put in place, and they understand their values. You mentioned values. But outside of that setting, I would suspect that it's less obvious and less clear who should be in the position of the sort of crisis responders, what the sort of common crises should be. And I'm curious, like, how, well, number one, are there crises that all or most industries should be thinking about? And then how do they go beyond those common crises to their industry specific or company specific crises?
Well, I think that the first part would be around values. That's something that almost everybody really should dive into, is their values, and that they're living their values. If you are going to state a value, you gosh darn well better live it. If you say diversity is important, your board better be diverse. Your supply chain better be diverse. Those are very common crises for folks.
Yeah.
I think best advice, reputation and brand are not the same thing. Your brand is what you pay for. Your reputation is owned by your public. They have an expectation of you. So they're your stakeholders, and they hold your reputation. So if you are doing things that they don't expect from you, that creates a crisis. So it's the values and then living the values.
Yes. We've seen that so many times, by the way, in the news right now, where companies are abandoning certain values, right? Like you mentioned, diversity, equity, inclusion. We see, all these companies that say they stood behind, and then all of a sudden the, administration changes and they've abandoned, and everybody's like, what? And it does cause a crisis, and it's creating a loss of, like you said, a loss of trust in the company as a result. I want to get a little bit more into it, but I also recognize we're almost at this ad break. So let's continue with this, like, common crises versus industry or company specific crises. How can they sort of start identifying in order to plan those out? You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Stephanie Craig, who is a crisis management and reputation expert. We'll be right back in just a moment.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I'm Linda Marcanico. The A Train to Sedona is a memoir about my journey to love and compassion. It's also the name of my new broadcast on Wednesdays at 12 noon. When we are spiritual, we embrace possibilities and ideas. which strengthen our mind, body, spirit, health, and wisdom. On the A Train to Sedona broadcast, I plan to interview guests who embrace these expansive practices. Join us on Wednesdays at 12 noon on Talk Radio New York City.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to the Hard Skills with me, Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Stephanie Craig. Stephanie, we talked about not living out the company values. And I would add, also, I think you mentioned misalignment, right? Misaligned values. Any other common types of crises that all companies or industries should be looking out for? And then what else might they be able to assess internally that is maybe specific to them?
I'd like to tell a little story to really identify that. We have a client that's a government contractor. And you'd mentioned the VA before. They, like a lot of government contractors, they employ a lot of veterans. And so the Thursday night before the Friday of Veterans Day weekend, which happened to be a pay period, they get a call from their payroll provider. Your payroll's not going to be there on time. So not only are their employees going to be without their pay on a long weekend, it happens to be a veteran-heavy company during Veterans Day weekend. But because they had done all of this work that I described, they knew that their number one value was supporting their employees. Their employees were their number one asset. So they knew no matter what, they were going to make sure that these folks made it through the weekend. They also knew that they needed a rainy day fund for that. So they had that. The third thing they knew is that their employees would receive information by email, but they would only interact by phone. So they sent out an email that said, this has happened. If you can't make it through the weekend, here's a 1-800 number. We'll help. We'll make sure that you make it through. I think they had, at the time, 4,600 employees. 12 called. Everybody made it through. But a funny thing happened. Because they responded this way, employee satisfaction went up.
Yeah.
Employee retention went up. And recruitment went up. All because they had done this pre-work. And so those types of crises are very, excuse me for 1 second, Mira.
Yeah. And while you take a sip, I was thinking, that just shows care. We all want to feel cared for by not just our family, but our employers, our leaders. That's what we all are looking for. And that is the thing that, I hate the word loyalty, but it increases our desire to stay engaged and connected and appreciate where we are and feel good about where we are. I mean, that's what I heard in your story.
Absolutely. And also this is about the people that are loyal to you. In this case, it was their employees.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to remember what the issue was. This was about 6 to 8 weeks ago. Costco, there had been a huge recall. I think it was cucumbers. And, everyone announced there was a recall. Costco called their customers. They know that one of their most important stakeholder groups is their customers. So they called them. Do you think that for the rest of those customers' lives, they will cancel their Costco membership? Absolutely not. because they showed that they cared about them, but they also had a crisis plan in place because they knew they had to call them.
Mm-hmm.
So all of this planning helps you make those decisions before the issue hits.
Yeah. And what I'm also hearing is that's part of the investment. Like you mentioned investment in the beginning of the call. And it's not just a monetary investment, is the investment like of calling. That's an investment of time and attention, right? To people. And it seems like a lot to contact 4,600 people or everybody who is a Costco member, right? But actually, right. But actually, that is an incredible investment in the future sustainment of your stakeholders and retention of your employees.
If you kind of game out this company, so they took the time to figure out that their employees would open email, but they would only communicate via phone. So they have happy employees. Those employees tell other employees or other people,
Mm-hmm.
that are coming into the workforce and say, this is a great place to work. So that great place to work means that they can expand who they work with because everyone knows that they have happy employees. That means they're getting the best employees. So they get more business from it. So this is really a ripple effect. It is lovely. The carrying is real. I don't think you can fake that. People are really smart. But the ripple effects it has for an organization, a company in particular, it does actually benefit you as an organization to make these investments and show the people that hold your reputation that you care about what they think.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's switch gears. We've talked a lot about identifying crises and sort of spotting, anticipating. Let's move into sort of like responding, reacting, mitigating later on. And I'm going to go back to your framework, clarity plus trust equals strategic speed. Can you define more about strategic speed? What does that mean?
Well, so strategic is you know what's going to happen, right? You've thought about the different kinds of situations that can befall you. You can spot them earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and then you know what you're going to do. So if it's a if it's a food recall, you know that you're going to be able to get to people faster because you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to make a lot of these decisions in the moment.
Yeah.
Back to the company I mentioned, before folks left for work on Friday and wondered where their paycheck was, they knew exactly what they were going to do and they did it. So there was no negative blowback because someone went to their bank account and their money wasn't there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so these types of situations where you have all the decisions made prior to, not all the decisions, because you can't make all of them. That's what the difference between strategic speed and speed. You have to be fast. You have to act. You can't sit there and you can't hum and hob, oh gosh, what are we gonna do? Because people can fill in the blanks for themselves, and you don't want that. But you also don't want to make decisions in the moment that should have been made, that you could have made before. Well, who's our spokesperson? Figuring that out, 2, 3 hours have gone by. People start filling in the blanks themselves on social media, on breaking news. They start filling it in themselves, something you could have decided months in advance. So that's why it's strategic.
Yeah.
The things that you need to do in the moment can be done in the moment because you're not busying yourselves with decisions that could have been made 3 months ago. And the speed part of it, you need to be fast because you need to be able to tell your story first. There's a cardinal rule in politics that I still live by, which is define yourself before your opponent can define you.
Yeah. Yeah.
This applies here. Tell your story to whoever your stakeholders are. And I think that's an important part of this. You don't need to tell your story to everybody. You need your stakeholders to know what your story is.
Yeah. And I would add to that, this is not about spin. This is about owning your own narrative. Because people will make up all kinds of stories about you if they have the chance. And I had that experience before I had my company. I had, a situation where someone was upset with the decision that I made in my past, career, and they put it up on the internet, and it was not true, and I couldn't take it down. And that was the first thing that popped up because I didn't own my own narrative online about sharing all of the good things I was doing, and being able to sort of demonstrate all of the work I was actually doing. And that taught me a big lesson, that if you don't own your narrative, if you don't own your story, someone else will. So I totally, this is at the individual level as well as at the organizational level too.
Absolutely. Well, your reputation as an individual is important too. And it's when it's somebody that's in your sphere that is false or inaccurate narrative, it's harming your reputation, which also is valuable to you as an individual.
Yeah.
And that to me is something that has to be done. You have to deal with it. You can't let it, in today's day and age, back when, we were printing book by book by book on a printing press. That's different. We can't do that anymore. Things last forever.
Yeah. And one of the other things that I'm sort of like light bulb moment here is how much the intangible asset of reputation is. Like, reputation is an asset. We don't think about it that way, but it's part of your company. That's an asset, and you want to invest in that asset and maintain that asset and protect that asset as much as the ones that are very tangible, right?
Absolutely. Because somebody holds your reputation. It may not be that you are, we'll go back and use Costco. May not be Costco that has a sterling reputation to almost everybody. It very much could be, okay, for instance, I have a friend, her company has 6 customers. They will never have any more than 6 customers. But those 6 customers, what their opinion matters exponentially. So understanding who those people are is really, really important, because that reputation matters to them. Your reputation matters to them because they matter to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm noticing that I can't believe we're reaching another ad break. I feel like I just got started on this. Before we go to the ad break, a couple of things that are on my mind that I want to be able to talk about when we come back is, number one, what are the ways that we can think about the connection between having a crisis readiness program and building up sort of like a culture of responsiveness? And number two, things that maybe we might need to think about more now than maybe we before, right? The current socio-political climate and all of that stuff. So you're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Mira Broncu, and our guest today, Stephanie Craig, and we'll be right back in just a moment.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Ready to serve up success with a splash? Hi, I'm Bruce Kramer, a.k.a. the Corporate Cockroach.
I'm the Renaissance woman, Angie Snowball.
And I'm your strategy doctor, Dr. Meltesh Desange, inviting you to serving up success with a splash.
Join us as we shake things up with real talk and real strategies centered around awareness, action, and accountability.
And yes, there really is a cocktail involved. Please join us and sip your way to success.
Serving up success with a splash, where wisdom meets happy hours. Cheers!
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 You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Mira Broncu, and our guest today, Stephanie Craig. So, Stephanie, as we start this last piece of our podcast together, the thing that is on my mind is the connection between having a crisis readiness response program and what it means for how we build cultures of trust, and maybe how this applies or what we're not seeing or what we need to be thinking about in this current sociopolitical climate.
Well, first, I think in the idea of trust and what you do within your organization, the biggest impediment to having a crisis ready culture, and I do underscore the word culture, are silos. That if you hear kind of what I was threading through the whole earlier interview, was you have to talk to one another. You have to trust, right? And you have to talk across industries, or pardon me, silos. It's imperative to creating that kind of culture. For one of our clients, we literally just built a framework so IT, legal, and communications could talk to one another. That was all. Because it's so, in the event of a ransomware, this was a global company. So their cyber infrastructure was critically important. So just talking to each other was a huge step forward for them. So like I said, building that trust, that falls under the the big masthead of trust, but trust that the person that you are going to lean on is going to do what they say they're going to do. So that is trust in your own team, be that an organizational wide team or your own communications team or your own IT team or your own legal team. And then it is understanding that you need to talk across sectors or sections because you need to speak the same language. So building those relationships, building those bridges, building those cross-function fibers that can help you absolutely energize when you need to. I have a friend that works for a global casino or a global gaming company, I'll call it that. And their head calls everybody together in the infrastructure twice a year for a barbecue. For no than a barbecue, because he understands that the person in Macau and the person in Vegas need to be comfortable enough to pick up the phone knowing it's 3:00 in the morning in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And that sort of bridge building, that can happen at a big organization, a small organization. It's important and it needs to happen. And it doesn't matter what side of organization you are.
And folks, yet again, it comes down to relationship building.
Absolutely. And knowing who's important.
Yeah.
And to the second part of your question, I think that that's also really important, which is, we are in interesting times. What's that old Chinese proverb? May you live in interesting times. We're living in interesting times. And corporate America is really, in all businesses, if you think about it, are on very unsettled terrain, uneven terrain. And that, I think my biggest recommendation to our clients and folks in general is find out what your core values are and who your core stakeholders are. And then you have to weigh external factors. As I mentioned, I went to the University of North Dakota, and so if anyone has ever been to a Target in the upper Midwest, it is they are like shrines. But so I'm a very loyal Target person. But they've seen a real impact because they were very much known as folks that they prioritized diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
And then they said they weren't going to anymore. So an entire community has said, well, we will not shop there. And that's that disconnect between your stakeholders and doing what you say you're going to do. And it's a hard decision because they're being told can't have these anymore. Their consumers are saying you need to have those programs. That's what we expect of you. And there's some really hard conversations happening in organizations. But I think if you are core to who your values are and who your stakeholders are, back to Costco again. They knew they're very, very clear on who they are and who matters to them. And so they haven't gotten rid of them.
Yeah.
I mean, by that, I mean DE&I policies. And so this is a time where, for instance, if your state government and your federal government differ on what they require, the safest place for you to be is your core values and your core constituents.
Yeah. This I'm not going to get the saying right, but it reminds me of the saying, like, don't let a good crisis go to waste,
Right.
Like these are if you're going to spin this in some kind of positive way, like these are the moments that test us, that force us to really focus hard on those values and think about all of the things that you mentioned, the who are we, the what matters to us, going back to who our what matters to the people that matter to us, right? And developing those trust-based policies, procedures, etc., that help us instead of causing us to spin and get lost when there's these kinds of massive turmoil and crises. In the last few minutes, actually 1 minute, any thoughts about the sort of management of crisis upon crisis? Like it feels like it's sort of stacking one on top of each other. Is there anything different that you would recommend now that you would have recommended like 5-10 years ago?
You need to be ready. It's no longer an option. You have to be ready. But also check in with your people. There are a lot of folks that aren't built like me, which is probably a really good thing. That this crisis upon crisis upon crisis is very mentally unsettling, and it is very draining. So check in on your people. And honestly, if you do the thing to prepare, it's actually easier on your people because they know they don't have to worry about doing the things. They know that the things are going to happen, that they're going to be able to make the decisions, that they've already decided what their values are, so their decision-making process is easier. Yes, crisis upon crisis upon crisis, but do the things. Do all the preparation, do the values evaluation, so you don't have to be making those hard decisions in a moment of crisis.
Yes. Excellent. Okay. I have loved our conversation today. If people want to learn more from you, work with you, where can they go? How can they find out more? I do have it up on the screen for those of you who are watching, but for those who are listening, where can they go?
Well, we are going to give you something for your show notes, which will be a dedicated webpage for everyone who's listening and watching. But also find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I'm just Stephanie Craig. I look like an approachable ninja, I like to call myself. But also, I'm on Substack, and we have a free service for folks, which is called Crisis of the Month, which is right there. And it just helps. Instead of holding up a newspaper, we deliver once a month a free email that helps you work through what a crisis would look like for you. Always will. Kith is part of Kith and Kin. friends and our friend clients. And part of that is if something's free, it's going to be free.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, audience, what did you take away from our conversation today? And more importantly, what's one small change you can implement this week based on what you learned from Stephanie? There's a lot she shared and a lot of very implementable things. So share it with us on LinkedIn. She mentioned she's on LinkedIn. We both live there. Share it with us so we can cheer you on. Talkradio.nyc is also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts. That's where this podcast is going to be, all over the place. If today's episode resonated with you, share it with a colleague, leave a review. And if you're looking for more personalized support or leadership around leadership and team coaching, you can also go to gotowerscope.com and schedule a consultation with me. Thank you to talkradio.nyc for hosting. Together, we will navigate the complexities of leadership and emerge stronger on the other side. Thank you for joining me, Stephanie. Really appreciated the time today and learning much more from you about the connections that we made between crisis, reputation as an asset and as a culture builder to companies and industries. Had never made those connections, but I love that. So this is Dr. Mira Brancu with Stephanie Craig signing off. Until next time, stay steady, stay present, and keep building those hard skills. Thank you, everybody. Take care.